Most salespeople give away discounts way too early and then they wonder why they're not making any profit. I'm guilty of that too. I'm sure you've probably done it. And if you have, there's usually a reason behind it. Today, I'm going to tell you and your team 3 mindset shifts that are going to help you move everything forward and get better in sales. So, without further ado, starting with number 1. Never negotiate against yourself. What does that mean? That means when somebody asks you about the product or a service, the first thing that you do should not be to offer a discount. I know, especially when they're applying pressure, it may seem like the right thing to do. But a question could be asked here. What would a potential prospect think if you've reduced your price? Do you think that they'll think, what an amazing person you are? Or do you think that they might think, whoa, this person was probably overcharging? Or do you think that they might think that this product is not really that good? Maybe? Because remember, price also signals quality. So every time you give a discount, you're indirectly saying or directly saying, we're not that good. Moving on. Silence is power. And sometimes it's wise to just let your prospect talk. I tend to notice a lot of times so-called sales consultants talk a lot. And the problem with talking is it doesn't help with the listening part. And listening, if you ask me, is way more important than the talking part. And the reason it's important is because the prospect is usually directly or indirectly telling you what they want, what they need, and what their goals are. And here is the gold mine of making sales. Because if you're listening, if you're actively listening, and you're focusing in and asking the right questions, then eventually you will figure out exactly what they want. And what that means is, there's a time when I stayed quiet, was a prospect. I was selling software as a service. At the time, it was in Germany. Now, bear in mind, the software was fairly expensive. It went anywhere from $250,000 to about 2.5 million euro. And what that means is, a lot of these B2B clients, they see the value in it because it saves them. But the point is, it's not about what we think they see. It's about what they're telling us that they need, their challenges and their problems. Hence why a perfect question is, what are your current problems? What are your current challenges? What's the biggest challenge? And usually they'll say, in this example, hey, one of our biggest challenges is cash flow. So for example, Germany is very known for what's called Mittelstand, small and middle service, or the middle of those firms. And their main issue is cash flow. So what a supply chain software does is it keeps the cash moving because the product isn't ordered until the customer orders it, which means it doesn't need to be made, which means that the cash can stay in the company's bank account. Hence why, instead of me selling them the software, I sell them the vision of the problem that they're trying to solve. Hold on a second, it'll make more sense as we go on. So what a lot of people might be thinking or inclined to doing is, hey, our software does this, and it will help you with this, which means this. A better way is, what are your current problems? They say, for example, hey, we've got a lot of stock. Okay, what does that mean for you? Think of the 5 whys, in consulting. The 5 whys being you're asking why, another 2 whys, so that you can get to the root problem. So for example, we've got a stock issue, they say. Then you say, okay, no problem. What does that mean for you? Oh, the stock that we've got might get rusty. You know, if we've built a car, for example. Okay, that makes sense. What else? It depreciates, which means it loses its value, which means that they're losing money. No problem. What else does that mean? It also means that we've got cash tied in on a product that we haven't sold. What does that even mean? That means that we may eventually have a bottleneck in terms of cash flow. Okay, and what would that mean? That would mean that we go out of business. Oh, okay. So all of these, going back to what I told you, is they're eventually trying to avoid cash flow problems, because cash flow problems means they can't meet their financial obligations, which also means that they might go out of business. And these companies have been around for 50 or 100 years. It might be a company that's been inherited. Hence, their biggest issue is cash flow, and it's because they don't want to go out of business. Should I have reduced the price from the get-go? No. What I just showed you is actively listening, figuring out the root problem, the real problem that you're solving, and 3, providing the solution in a way that doesn't degrade from it. Next, you want to anchor high before they anchor low. So for example, you put your ideal price on the table first and make it seem bold. I remember there's this video with Alex Hormuzzi where he goes, somebody was trying to push him on price, and they're like, oh, please give me a discount. Can you please give me a discount? And he was like, I'd love to, but you should have seen the price, how high it was before. And the customer or the prospect automatically was like, whoa, okay, it used to be higher. Okay, I'll accept the price. And the idea here is you want to kind of cheekily aim a bit high. So if you've got, let's say, for example, you're selling a TV, TV's £1,000, you say 1,200. And they'll say, yeah, but I want a discount. And even if you do, it's kind of like, the margin's kind of there. Or maybe you're selling, let's say, stock. You're selling stock in your company, you're raising funds, and you push the price, and they naturally will bring it down and they'll do their due diligence, etc. But the point is, if you bring it all the way up, when they do bring it down, it's above what you had in terms of your threshold. And this again is something that we can help you with. It's not hard, but it's more of a mindset. And if you're used to leaving money on the table, then this might be a bit foreign to you. But don't worry, this is how we all learn. And the idea is sometimes it may be wise to give a discount, but that's in particular situations where there's a quid pro quo, a win-win and a trade-off. Let me give you an example again with this software as a service. So the prospect goes, can I get a reduction in the price? You go, no problem. On the condition that instead of you taking 12 months, you take a 24-month contract and we give you 5% off. Now you might be thinking that you're giving them a percentage off. Yes, but it's for an extra 12 months, which means X amount of cash flow that we didn't have before. Make sense? And with that kind of mentality, you can move the needle without shooting yourself in the foot. And that's what a lot of people don't really think about, is they want to give, but they don't think of what am I getting in return? What's my company getting in return? And you need to always have that ahead, planned, prepared, and ready. And the next thing is every discount, as mentioned, needs to also make them feel like they want something. So when you do give a discount, you'll see this a lot with insurers, be it health insurance or life insurance. They'll say, we'll give you, based on your premium, a £50 Amazon voucher or a £100 Amazon voucher or a £500 Amazon voucher. Bear in mind, if you're paying something like £300 a month, then £200, really? And it's said in the words of gift voucher, so the discourse or the words around it is you're getting something, you're getting a benefit. Bear in mind that benefit you could have already had. So sometimes it's not always worded as a discount. It can be worded as a benefit. Maybe you give someone a treat, but usually you want that treat to push them towards buying, but without it being manipulative, if you will. And that also depends on the sector you're in. It doesn't make sense to give someone, let's say, airline tickets if you're selling a car. Maybe it's not even connected, but maybe it makes sense to give them, say, a discount on their service, or in England, what we call an MOT, their car service. Maybe you give them a package where that's included, or other services that they might seem of value, depending on the service or the product you're giving. I hope that makes sense. And then finally, if all of this resonated, because I am aware a lot of sales reps tell me, they're like, Mo, I did the training for a year and my company's, they've spent money on my training, but I just feel like it's a bit short. I don't get the negotiation part, and I don't get the extras that, that require a bit of patience. And I always tell them, I'm like, I get it, I've been there, I've done that. And a lot of it is you're expected to learn, but the problem is it's not structured. It doesn't make sense a lot of times for the specific industry you're in. So for example, I've had a client who's selling cars, but they're getting very generic stuff that doesn't really consider the customer's pain points. And it's important because the more specific the sales training is, the better your sales team is, and the better and higher the amount of gross profit and sales that you get. Having said that, to reiterate, if you want me to help your team and to run this with your business for 15 minutes, I know you're busy, 15 minutes is nothing, and we can bounce some ideas, hit me in my link in the description section. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this useful, and feel free to leave in the comments something that I should have added and I didn't. See you at the top, my friend.